welcome to this video tutorial. I am Chudumen Namdi. Here we are going to learn how to build a counter app application in Java using the Java GUI Swing framework. Now let's begin. Now I'm using the VS Code for this project, but the best IDE for Java project is the IntelliJ IDEA IDE built by JetBrains. Now let's begin. First, we'll create our project and we'll name it counter app. Now I will right click. Now click on new Java project. Now click on no build tools. Select my project location. Then the name counter. So it creates a new Java project for me. So here we have the SRC folder which contains all our source file and our source code. Everything will be here. And we have the lib folder which will contain the libraries we will import in our project. Then the VS Code is just the settings based on the workspace we're working on. And we have the README all generated for us. So I'm using the extension pack for Java and also the code pack for Java installed in my VS Code. Let me search for it. I think I'm using extension pack. I think it's taking time to come up. So I'm using extension pack for Java. So that's why I'm able to get all this Java project and new Java file in my right click in my VS Code. So now let's start. Here we have the app.java, which is the entry point of our Java project. See, we have the void main, which is the entry point of any Java project, and this just prints out hello world. So you see we have the system.out.println method call that just prints out hello world to the console. So here we have the run and debug. Now we can run this. See, it's running. I have so many extensions. This is truthful. So you see it's running and we see hello world printed out in our console. So this is basically a console Java project, but we are going to make it a GUI project in which we can increment and decrement a counter value. Now to begin, we'll need to remove this and then import JFrame. So you see it's imported from javax.swing.jframe. Then we'll just name it JFrame and create a new instance of it, JFrame. Then let's set the title. We'll call the set title method to set the title of our frame. So this creates a frame just like we have in our VS Code. So this frame or the container of our VS Code in which all these buttons are all contained is the JFrame. So we first initialize it, then set the title. Now let's set the title to, let's call it counter app. Then after that we will now say frame dot set visible. We will now pass through to it. So with this sets the title of our counter app, and then this makes the JFrame to be visible. Without this line, our JFrame will not be visible. So let's run it. So you see our app here. You see our app counter app is visible. So now let's set the bounds. You see it was very tiny and up here. Now let's set the bounds like this. We say frame dot set size. Now the first parameter we are passing is the width. So let's make it 500 and then make the height 500. Now let's refresh. So you see our app is loaded with the size 500 and the width 500. So you see it's well defined now without being tiny, and for us now to push it out. Now we'll begin to add our buttons and our text. So we'll add a increment button and decrement button, and then we'll have a text in between that will display our counter state. Now first we are going to set our counter state. Let's call it counter and set it to 0. So now we'll add buttons. We'll add an increment button. To add a button, we'll first create an instance of it from JButton, and then we'll now name this button increment button and then initialize it. You see it has so many constructors. It has an empty constructor, or we can pass actions to it. The string, so this is the string text. This text will be what will be the text displayed in the button. Now this is the icon that you can just pass an icon straight. Then this is either you can set a title of the button, the text to be displayed on the button, and also the icon to be displayed. Now let's take the text and just add an increment here, and then we'll have semicolon. So we'll create a decrement button, then the new keyword, then new button. We'll now pass decrement text to it. Now we have a squiggly orange yellow line because we have not used this instance of the button. We'll be coming to that. Now we'll now set a J label. This J label is where we will display the current value of our counter. So we'll call it J label, then we'll name the instance counter label, and then create an instance of J label. So for now we are not passing anything to it for now, or we can just pass 0 to it. Now since we have created all these components, we are going to add them to the frame. Creating this component like this does not automatically add them to the frame. We will have to call the add method and pass these components to the add method to add them to the frame. So to add these components to the frame, we will call the frame and call the add method. Then let's add the increment button to it. We'll call add the increment button. Now let's save, and then let's run our app again. So we'll only see the increment button in our app. So you see we are seeing only the increment button in our app. We do not see the decrement button because it has not been added to the frame. It has not been added to the frame. We only added the increment button. So that's why we're only seeing the increment button here. Now to see the decrement button, we'll have to add it to the frame. So we'll come down here, say frame.add, then the decrement button. Let me just copy this, the name, decrement button, then semicolon. Then we'll save and reload. So you see we are seeing now our decrement button. We are not seeing the increment button because it is pushed to the other side. So we are not going to see the increment button, but we'll add a layout later so for us to see where the increment and both the decrement buttons are. Then finally we add our counter label. Add our counter label here. Then we have successfully added all these buttons to the frame and they will show in it. Now we see all our buttons and counter label components are all jam-packed in our JFrame. So now let's move all of them to different layouts in the frame. So in this add method, we can also set the layout or the border layout, flow layout, flex layout, or any layout at all in which we want to organize our components in a container component. Now we want to make this increment button to be at the left of the JFrame, the decrement at the right, and this counter level at the center. So we'll pass in another parameter here, and we'll call the border layout. So since we are making this increment button to be at the left, so it will be at the west of the border layout. Now this decrement will be at the east. So you see it has so many properties: east, line end, north, page end, page start, depending on whatever layout you are choosing. So let me make this east and make this counter label now to be at the center. Now let me refresh. So you see the increment at the left, decrement at the right, then the counter label at the center. Now let me make the text to be at the center of the counter label. So I come here and say swing constraints dot center, then I save and I reload. So you see it's at the center now. But now if you click on this button, we are not going to have any action being performed. We'll come to adding listeners to buttons. So the next thing we are going to do is we will add mouse event listener to our buttons, so that when we click on them, they will either increment our counter state or decrement them. Now let's begin. Let's add a mouse listener event to our increment button. So to do that, we'll call the add mouse listener method on our increment button. So we will now pass in our mouse listener object. So we'll call new mouse listener like this, and then we will implement all the methods there. So our VS Code enables us to add all unimplemented methods. So this is going to throw unsupported operation exceptions. So what we are going to do is that we are going to remove all of them, because I'll be needing only the mouse clicked. So but we must implement all the methods: mouse clicked, mouse pressed, mouse released, and mouse entered. So this will be called when our button is pressed and released. This will be called mouse pressed will be called when our button is pressed. It will be called. Now mouse released will be called when our button is pressed and released. Now mouse entered will be when our mouse enters the button or the component, but in this case our button. Mouse exited will be when our mouse exits from the button. So the only method we need here is the mouse clicked. So here we are going to increment our counter state. So we'll have to change this to static, because we are referencing a non-static class member variable instead of a static method. So the error goes away. Then since we have updated this counter by 1, we will now set the counter label to the value of the counter. So we will call the counter label, then we'll call the set text method on it. This set text method sets the text on the counter. So we'll now pass in the text here. So here we will pass in the counter member variable, but in this case counter is an int, but the set text requires a string. So we are going to convert this counter to a string. So we will call the integer dot to string method. So you see it takes an int and then returns a string from it. So you see our error is gone. Now let's save and run. So if we click on this increment, this will increment. So you see it increments and updates the label. So you see now we'll have to add mouse listener to this decrement because nothing happens. So this decrement will make the mouse listener to decrement this. So let's fold up this code, then come here and add the mouse listener to decrement method. So we say decrement button, dot add mouse listener. We'll remove this null. Then as usual, like we did in the increment button, we'll add the mouse listener. Then we'll add all the methods, quick fix, add unimplemented methods, and like always, we'll clear this because it will throw unsupported operation and will crash our application. So we have to remove all this. Mouse exited, we'll remove this also. Then we'll come to the mouse clicked here, then do the reverse of what we did in the mouse listener for the increment button. So here we are going to decrement the counter by 1. So what this does, sorry I didn't explain this, what this does is to decrement the counter and assign the value of the decrement to the counter itself. So this is just like doing this counter. So this is basically what we are doing with this code here. So we will now update the counter label by calling the set text on it, then converting the counter to string. Let's save and reload. So bring our up, we increment, we decrement. So you see it works. Now let's add a reset button. This reset button will reset the counter to 0 whenever it is clicked. Now what we are going to do, let's fold up this code, bring down this, then come here and add another button. So to add another button, as usual, we'll say JButton. We will now call it the reset button. We then create the instance of it JButton and pass in reset here, then semicolon. Then we'll come down here, reset button, we'll now add mouse event listener, then new mouse listener, and implement all methods. Like always, we'll clear all this. Come here, we'll clear this. We'll clear this and this. Then last, the mouse exited. Then we'll come to this mouse clicked. Here we'll set the counter straight to 0 because we are setting it to 0, and then update the counter label. The same thing, set text, then like we did integer dot to string, then we'll pass in the counter. So it works. We'll save and let's reload and see what happens. Come down here, you see we are not seeing our reset button. So what we have to do is we'll have to use the border layout because we not set any border layout here when we created it. So we need to set a border layout and also add it to the frame. Yeah, because we didn't add it to the frame, so it will not show. Say frame dot add reset button. Then we'll save. Let's reload. So the reset button takes over in the center, but we don't want that, so we'll come and say border layout. Let's make it to be in the bottom. So let's say south and reload. So you see it's in the south. If we say north, it will be up. Let's make it north to see where it will be. It will be at the top. So you see it will be at the top, but we want it to be at the bottom, so we'll say south. Then we'll reload. Then let's increment, and then if we reset it to 0, so you see it resets to 0. If we decrement, and if we reset, it zeroes out everything. So now, next thing we'll have to do is to center our JFrame to be at the center of our screen whenever it loads. You see, it goes off to this left whenever we reload. Let me show you. So it starts off from the left. So let me make it to be centered whenever we launch our application. So to do that, we'll call this set location relative. We'll pass null here, then we will save and reload. So you see it shows up at the center. So now let's increment the width further and reload, so it comes out bigger. Very good. Now the next thing we are going to do is to refactor our code. You see that everything is done in this app entry class and everything is done in this main method. So let's move it to another Java file, which is, we'll call it the counter.java, so that everything about our application will be done there. So to do that, first we'll have to create a new Java file class. We'll name it counter. Then here we'll now have a start method. Here we'll come back to this our Java app and copy every code we'll have here, paste it to this start method in our counter class. Then we'll copy the imports. We'll come and paste them here. So we have, so it's saying the return type is not, so it's, the start is not returning anything, so it will make it void. It's not returning anything. It will just kickstart our counter application. So we have next the counter state. So we'll remove it from here, come to the counter Java app, paste it here. We don't want to make it a static. We'll remove it, and you see there's no more errors in our application. So we'll save our counter class, come here to our void. Here we will now create, since the counter is a class, we will create an instance of it in our app.java main method and then call this start method. So we'll come here, we'll say counter, call it counter app, call the instance counter app. We'll now say new counter, then we'll now call the start method counter dot start. That's all. We'll save. Now let's restart. So you see our app still works, decrement and reset. So you see our app still works even though we have refactored it. So you see it, we have done away with a lot of code inside this main. So everything was pushed inside this counter, and we know that this counter class is the only thing holding our code, and we just need to call the start method here to kickstart or launch our application. Now another refactor we can do is to separate JFrame to another class, to another method. We can come here and call it create frame. Then we'll just carry everything here inside it, and then return the frame. Return the frame. Since it's returning a frame, so we'll make it to return a JFrame, and then we'll come here and say JFrame frame create JFrame. So you'll see we have moved this section of code to another method. So you see it will be easy for us to manage. So this is the end of this video tutorial. Thank you so much for sticking with us to the end of this video. So we have learned how to create a Java Swing GUI application using the Java.x Swing framework. So you see how we're able to create a frame using the JFrame, set the title, set the size, set the location, and also how we're able to set buttons using the Java Swing framework, add mouse listeners to it, add labels, and then add all these components to the framework and make it visible, and also to detect the mouse events, the mouse clicked, to increment, decrement, or reset the counter, and then update the counter label with the current state of the counter variable, and also see how we're able to refactor our app from the void main to creating another class for them, and then moving all the code to a method so that we simply just have to create the instance of the class counter in our app class and then call the start method, and the application launches. So thank you so much. If you have any questions or anything you need to be addressed, or any application at all you need to see how it can be created in Java and also using the Java Swing framework, don't hesitate to contact me or comment down below in the comments. I will be there to also answer and see your comments. Thank you so much. Please like and share this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more video like this. Thank you so much, and see you on the next Java video. Bye.